We just watched episode 1 of season 2 of X-Men 97. This episode is called Days of Past Future. You get it, you guys? Days of Future Past, but the opposite. Now, I'm going to make a video for each one of these episodes. However, for a reason that I understand, episodes 1, 2, and 3 dropped at the same time, on the same day. Episode 4, the only other episode I've seen, comes out next week. As will be clear from the title of episode 3, it is a two-parter. Part of me expected we would get episodes 1 and 2 in 1 week and 3 and 4 in 1 week, but it seems like the thought process is there's 3 teams of X-Men. The ones in the future, the ones in the present, and the ones in the past. So this week we are getting an episode for each team. So like if your favorite X-Men is Bishop, you don't have to wait until next week to see Bishop in the episodes. Although, that's a pretty bad way to start this video because we are going to be recapping everything that happened in episode 1 of season 2. And one of the first things that happens is Bishop and Forge are hanging out together. At the end of last season, only a couple of characters survived, as Forge never ended up going to the space station where all the X-Men would be taken through time. Bishop disappears in episode 3 and never comes back to the series. So both of these characters still on the board, and we see them link up at the end of season 1. Say they've got to figure out who took the X-Men where. Or when. A lot of that in these first couple episodes. And like I said, we're going to spoil everything from this episode 1 of season 2. In this conversation, just going to talk about things I liked about the episode, things that I was surprised by, and little details that I found interesting. Pretty much first thing we see in this episode, and something I really like about the 3 that we've seen so far, and something that was true of the original season, but is a bigger deal now because of how segmented these teams are. You only get a name card if you are a main character in that episode. But also, I don't know who's in charge of doling out cards. I think we can give Forge one. Not overrun with X-Men in this intro. I'm sure they could afford the time. And also, all of the clips have something to do with the character from that episode. So it's just a detail. Again, it's one that was true before, but it's a bigger deal now because the intro really does set the team you're going to be watching in this episode. Love that Trish Trilby's back, and she still has her markings from when she got turned into an evil human robot, and as we will see in the rest of the episodes, the humans in this show got right back to business as usual, so even if you got taken over by Bastion, you can still have a job reporting the news. So in the beginning of this episode, we get the pitch for episodes 1 and 3. Bishop and Forge are working together to find the X-Men. Bishop can just time travel, so that's fine. Forge needs to build a time machine, which he's done with like this janky old photo booth. For people that don't know, Forge's powers are he can create any machine, but he doesn't necessarily know how they work. So he can make the things that Reed Richards can make, but he can't explain why they're doing what they're doing. So like he can build a time machine, sure. We see that they're going after Apocalypse. We get the Apocalypse mugshot. Not sure where this picture came from. I love it. Some people have compared it to a mugshot from a certain president. That's a little unknown even for this show, but hey, when would you even get him? Who arrested Apocalypse? When was this picture taken? Somebody draw it? I guess that's probably it. So we learn that Bishop is going to go to the past, and Forge is going to go to the future. And it seems like the complete reason for why it is set up this way is because Forge and Storm have a thing going now, which is nice and all, but like, strategically. Guys, if you're trying to figure out who to send when, maybe send the guy who can absorb energy blasts into the time period where the bad guys all have energy weapons. But I don't know, that's just my advice. Hopefully it works out for him. In this scene, we get one of 2 90s name drops here, which both made it into the trailer, and both feel as silly as can be. That's this.
We gotta get the X-Men back to the 90s.
When I first heard this one, I said, that's not how people talk. We say we have to get the X-Men back to now. To the present day. But I guess if you're a time traveler like Bishop, you just call every time when it is. So honestly, for him, it kind of makes sense. We get what are described by the subtitles as cyberhounds. These are Apocalypse's robot foot soldiers. And apparently it is Wolverine's job to kill them, even though it really seems like every other X-Men that is in this time can do a better job than him. But like on more than one occasion, Wolverine will go up against these things. And because he only has bone claws, because there's no adamantium on his skeleton, Magneto took it all out last season. Every time Wolverine goes up against one of these things, he breaks his bone claws and they have to regrow. He's also got his feral Wolverine costume on. Get a lot of interesting costume choices in these couple of episodes. And this is what I think I really like about this season. The first season was about reestablishing this animated universe. So it was a lot of getting characters back together, putting them in the costumes we're familiar with. At the end of the season, they did get a little creative with what characters were wearing, but those were their outfits from the past. I like that now we're starting to see the evolution of these characters. They're moving forward in time. So then we learn that Scott and Jean are trying to raise Cable, but very important, they have not told Cable they're his parents yet. And both Forge and Scott and Jean make good arguments for why they should stay in this timeline or just go back. But the X-Men are nothing if not stubborn, so they don't leave immediately. So then we get the introduction of our characters that are these 3 episodes. These are the ones that showed up and I'm like, oh wow, we're doing them. I wouldn't say they're necessarily deep cut characters because they are from an X-Men run that is very popular, but they're deep cut characters that if you have not read that run, you wouldn't recognize them, and they're pretty memorable. So these characters working for Apocalypse here are known as the Final Horsemen. They're led by a character named Ozymandias, who is more or less Apocalypse's Renfield. We'll talk more about these 4 guys as they show up because you do get a little introduction of their powers pretty soon. But Apocalypse is in some sort of big tomb. And Ozymandias is like, we found you a new vessel, and it's this little guy, Cable. I do like Cyclops' and Jean's outfits here. This is like a wastelandy version of their original X-Factor outfits. Scott's blue and white, and Jean's red and yellow. And basically, they're like, we should take our kid back in time. So Scott goes to Mother Ascani. This is the character we saw very briefly at the end of last season. All right, so there's 2 clans here that are warring in the future. So there's the Ascani clan and the Akaba clan. The Ascani clan are the good guys. They are led by Mother Ascani, a mysterious character who has fire powers and a weird little braid and like red tattoos on her face. The other clan, the bad guys, are Clan Akaba. So Apocalypse, Ozymandias is Horsemen. They're the bad guys. Akaba, bad. Ascani, good. So for people that haven't read the comics or haven't come across her, because she's not in every issue of the X-Men, but she is a very important character. And you may recognize the look of her without knowing the name, although now that character is just called Ascani, I believe. This is a character known as Rachel Summers. She is the daughter of Scott and Jean. Cable is the son of Scott and Madeline Pryor, Jean's clone, which is something that I didn't want to, actually, the Anti-Donna guys, because they did such a great job, but...
Oh, Jean, my whole life flashed before our eyes. Our future son, Cable.
But technically, Cable is Scott and Madeline Pryor's son. But Rachel is Scott and Jean's daughter from the Days of Future Past timeline, which is the one where the Sentinels take over. And she is sent back by Kitty, her wife, so isn't that interesting, to warn the X-Men. And she does that. She joins Excalibur. She's on a bunch of different teams. You can usually recognize her because she has this red outfit, which is the Hound outfit, which is the distinction given to telepathic mutants, were used by a character named Ahab to hunt other mutants. She wears that for a while, gets a yellow and red spiky outfit. She's on X-Factor, and then she was a big player in Excalibur, where she started dating Betsy, who we'll see in a future episode. Anyway, so Scott right now is talking to his future child about whether he can take the child that he sent to the future back to the present timeline. It's incredible. But he doesn't know she's Rachel, obviously. I wouldn't be surprised if they introduced Rachel later in the season, but like one of Rachel's big moments in comics came when the X-Men weren't really a thing, and she joined the original Excalibur with Captain Britain, Megan, Shadowcat, and Nightcrawler, but we're not doing that because Nightcrawler's in the past. Captain Britain and Megan aren't a thing on this version of the show, and the show hates Kitty. So I don't know where she would fit in if she came back. She could be a teacher at the school. Here she's like, don't mess with time. Scott's like, but I'm his dad. Basically, what we'll learn from Mother Ascani is that she is the character that pulled the X-Men through time, which I think is very interesting, because obviously, if you had to guess, it seemed like Apocalypse is doing that for whatever reason, because both groups of X-Men went to important moments in Apocalypse's life, but here that's because Mother Ascani wants some backup, keeping Cable away from Apocalypse in her present. And then in the past, she wants to see if the X-Men can stop Apocalypse from being Apocalypse, and she sent Magneto. I bet that's gonna go great.
With my guidance, a god among insects.
Also, don't want to actually Forge, but when Forge says,
I know more about building satellites than raising kids.
Forge, you don't know anything about building satellites. You could build one, but you don't know how it works. That's your power, as far as I knew. Also, Forge calls himself
A man of science.
as opposed to
A woman of faith.
It's like, Forge, you did magic last season. I get you're like a sciencey mutant, but you don't need to figure this part out. And then we're reminded Morph is in this episode, morphing around. I will say there's not a lot of surprises on the voice cast, except Michael Johnston plays Nathan in this episode. People may recognize that actor from this year's super hit Obsession, where he played Bear. Apparently he did the voice of Nathan in last season, but was uncredited. Going over some of the other actors in this episode. Mother Ascani is voiced by Gates McFadden. People may know from Star Trek The Next Generation, played Dr. Beverly Crusher. There's a couple of Star Trek voice actors show up this season. You also have Tony Amendola voicing Ozymandias, who does a ton of work. The first thing that caught my attention on his IMDb page is he plays Eno Cordova, the Jedi Master from the Fallen Order games. It was Father in Fallout 4, Father Perez in the Annabelle movies. He's one of the bad guys in The Mask of Zorro. That's a good one. That movie is fun. Oh, and he was the Salman Rushdie from Seinfeld. Alright, listen, I got off track. This guy's a cool voice. But then Scott, Jean, and Nathan are running away, and we see a display of power by the Final Horsemen, so let's talk about them. In order of thing they do, you have Decimus Furious. He's a big Minotaur guy. One thing we learned about him, and this all comes in Uncanny X-Force number 3, Decimus Furious is the son of a philosopher from Rome who was forced to commit suicide for his ideas, which I think means he's Socrates' son? I don't know, we never figure out more about this. His mutant power is he could turn into a big giant Minotaur guy, and he became a gladiator and was eventually worshipped as the Minotaur. And people thought he was the Minotaur, even though there are other Minotaur characters in Marvel Comics, including the Minotaur Asterion, but either way, that's him. Pretty simple. And he is war. Then you have Ichisumi. She's a Japanese geisha from the 1800s, who, after she wasn't the prettiest woman in her village, manifested the mutant power to breathe a big swarm of beetles that attacked all of the other girls in her village. She becomes Pestilence. Then you've got Sanjar Javid. He's the one on the flying carpet. He was the illegitimate son of a king from Persia. By the way, if this is not clear, these horsemen were recruited throughout time by Ozymandias, who found their mutant powers and their life story interesting. Sanjar Javid has the ability to transmit disease through metal, which he usually transmits through his rings, although if you, like in the comics, are say Wolverine and you stab him with the adamantium claws that are part of your adamantium skeleton, he can use those too. I will say he's also in the story the last Final Horseman recruited, so the final Horseman, and he is given the position of death seemingly by default, even though clearly he should be Pestilence. Ichisumi should be Famine, because she can create a swarm of bugs, things traditionally destroy crops and eat famines. Decimus should be Death, because his name is Decimus and he's a big giant evil Minotaur with a big axe, which would make War clearly Jeb Lee. He has always been the most memorable part of this team. He's just a Confederate spy, pretended to be a Union soldier who played the drums, but when he went home from war, people saw his Union uniform and his family was burned alive, which activated his mutant powers, which is the ability to, through his drum, transmit through sound cancer that feeds on the flesh of those who hear it. And I get it, cancer, famine, but still, he is a soldier in war. After he gets his mutant ability, he goes back to war to kill more people. And the thing about these characters that you may be figuring out right now is it'd be pretty hard to fight them, since some of them can just give you a fatal disease. However, in the comics, the mutants that are sent to fight them are almost all mutants who can regrow or have some sort of regenerative healing factor. But B, more importantly, their powers only work at range, so once you get away from them, any diseases or sonic cancers you have disappear, if they haven't already killed you. So those are the Final Horsemen. They're kind of my MVP of this episode just because of how crazy a pull they are. That comic run, by the way, Uncanny X-Force, great. A lot of people's favorite X-Men run. It's written by Rick Remender with art by Jerome Pena, Dean White, Corey Petit, and gorgeous covers by Esad Ribic. And the team decides to go find Ship. If you forgot who Ship was, Ship is a celestial spaceship that we met in the X-Men animated series. Apocalypse uses it. And I said celestial because even though they don't specifically say the Celestials, the universal super powerful beings, we do get nods to the fact that Apocalypse's power comes from a mutant ability mixed with celestial technology. Ship, famously also a sentient ship, kind of has a thing with Beast in that episode. Beast flirts with the robot ship in the episode where he wears that backpack. Pretty cool. Summer's family gets free. We see more Scott zipping around using his optic blasts. I hope he gets something even a tenth of this cool in Doomsday. Obviously, it's going to do big giant optic blast. All I want is one fun acrobatic version of the optic blast. Also, I'm loving all the Jean force fields. And I love how she's able to just kind of bring Scott into him. That's cool. And then Storm uses her storm powers to summon solar energy from a solar storm, which I don't think is usually how her powers work, but it is cool. It is definitely not the most confusing powers on display in this episode, and that's not even Forge has pretty confusing powers. That prize, again, goes to Morph. And I only say this because I've always been on the, hey, what can Morph do? I find it a little bit more interesting if he's somewhat limited, because otherwise, he's never really important in these fights. He just kind of shows up to do a little cameo. I feel like any episode that really focused on how Morph's powers work would kind of fall apart, because they're pretty much unlimited. And it seems like the way he works is he can copy any physical trait. And originally I said, well, Quicksilver kind of breaks that because Quicksilver has a mutant trait. However, his mutant trait is sort of a physical trait. It's not just that he has extra strong legs, but it's that he has super metabolism, so that is something, hypothetically, Morph could copy. I am way more confused about what happens in this shot, where Morph turns into Thor and creates a Mjolnir that is somehow independent of his own body. And I slowed this down because I was confused, but he appears to catch the hammer, which would have to be part of him? And listen, I know it's just supposed to look cool, but like, man, can we not make one rule for how Morph works? If I'm fully misunderstanding someone, tell me in the comments. Wolverine's job, again, for some reason, is to kill all these big robots that it seems to be very painful for him to kill, as opposed to fighting any of the Horsemen who have a disease-based superpower, something he could definitely survive with his healing factor. And then Cable picks up a big gun, and everybody looks at it and goes, wow, that definitely is Cable, look at that gun. And then Mother Ascani using Phoenix powers, because Rachel is one of the characters that's been the avatar of the Phoenix, because she has red hair, which honestly is kind of how it works. But she safely, from her makeshift helicarrier, crashes the train into Apocalypse's stronghold. Ozymandias tells Apocalypse they have to flee, and that's where Apocalypse drops the even more heavy-handed line,
I must strike them at their most vulnerable. The 1990s.
And then Nathan accepts his place as these people's savior, and they love him. That's never been a problem for a Michael Johnston character before. Nathan merges with Beast's girlfriend, the Talking Ship, voiced here by Rachel Kimsey, who you may recognize as the voice of Wonder Woman in Justice League Action. Doesn't seem like she was the voice of the original ship, although I looked and could not find who that was in the original X-Men animated series, in which she appeared in 2 episodes, episode 10 of seasons 1 and 3. Anyway, and then we get the tease of episode 2, my favorite of these 4, which the episode takes place in the present day, which in this universe is 97. And we see the Cable has formed a version of X-Force, which I'll talk about in the next video. One thing that's noteworthy here, Naoko Mori voices Psylocke in this scene, and will go on to voice Psylocke in the future. People may remember her from the last season of The Boys, where she played Golden Geisha. And that's the first episode. Wrapping up all the future stuff. We got some of Mother Ascani, Rachel, using her powers. We got the final Horseman, which was a real treat. Morph's still doing weird stuff. Storm can control the sun, apparently. It's real fun. Setting up the big idea that Apocalypse is the threat of the entire season, which I do think they do a good job of tying in these 3 timelines, all of these characters, giving everybody something important to do. Like, sure, every season, certain characters are going to fall by the wayside, right? Last season, that was Morph. Beast didn't really have that much going on. This season's probably also going to be Morph and Beast. But as far as elevating Cable to a main character, figuring out a way to work in Psylocke and Archangel, bringing Bishop back, giving Forge a spot on the team, like, what this show is doing and the amount of mutants they are using as main characters is impressive. And that's what I really hoped this show would be, which is a show that focuses on different aspects of the world, so we're not always spending time with the same characters. Like I was saying, you only get a spot in the intro if you're in the episode, which is extra fun in episode 2. And listen, if you love the X-Men, like I do, you love superpowers, you love messy relationships, a lot of fantasy tropes, which reminds me of a video I was watching called Time to Pivot to Romantasy, I guess, by one of my favorite creators, Lindsay Ellis. In it, Lindsay talks about the romantasy genre, which I was fascinated by. I've been hearing about it for years, never really knew what it was. And I think Lindsay's perspective on it as an author who writes about something that's kind of similar is really interesting. I would say it's definitely worth a watch, whether you are a big fan of romantasy or, like me, someone who has heard about it a lot but doesn't really know what it is. And you can find that video along with tons of other videos on this video's sponsor, Nebula. Nebula is a subscription streaming platform that I and a bunch of other YouTubers you probably already love helped to create. First thing that's important, all of our videos go up there early and ad-free. So if you want to be the first person to see one of my Nando V movies or Nando Cut videos, Nebula is for you. And then there are series like Jetlag or Tom Scott's England, where they go up on Nebula a week before they go anywhere else. Then we also have Nebula exclusive series of videos, like Tom Nicholas has a series called Slow News Day. Captain Midnight has a series called Showrunners, where he looks at different people that have created television shows. The first episode is about Rod Serling in The Twilight Zone. The second episode is about Vince Gilligan in Breaking Bad. Looks at the journey of how they got to where they were and how that shaped the series they would showrun. And then Curious Archives Gods and Monsters series looks at these different legendary creatures from religion and mythology and talks about how the ideas of those creatures has evolved over time and they've turned into pop culture characters. So you can find all that great stuff exclusively on Nebula. And a year of Nebula is already a steal at $60 a year. That is $5 a month. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut, you can get Nebula for just $2.50 a month. That is $30 for the year. It's an awesome deal. Go check it out. I guarantee there is a creator you already love who's part of Nebula, and if you spend some time on Nebula, I bet you'll find your new favorite creator. After me, of course. Your second favorite creator, because I'm your favorite. Don't correct me. Again, that is go.nebula.tv/thenandocut. Again, we will have 2 more episodes this week for episode 2 and episode 3, and then videos released weekly as the episodes drop. That's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you around.